I'm David. Thank you for joining me in this how to play video of Wingspan. If you haven't had a chance yet, please check out our playthrough video and our review. Wingspan currently is the #1 family game on Board Game Geek as of September 2019. So this is part of our project to do videos on the top 100 family games according to Board Game Geek users. Behind me is a sample of the top 20, and Wingspan, as I said, is the current #1. Depending on when you're watching this, we'll see if it remains in that position over time. So Wingspan is a thematic game where you're placing birds in your habitat to get the most points. You're also going to have your birds lay eggs. Some of them will eat different foods. So after 4 rounds, the player with the most points will win. So if we're to show you here the score pad, you also can get points too by completing goals. So right here, this is from the playthrough. You get points for your birds, for your bonus cards, which will be these, which I'll show in a moment here. End of round goals, which we're playing this side. I'll show the other side in a moment. So there's 4 rounds and you can get points each round for certain goals. For eggs, which are right here. They're different colored eggs. It doesn't matter what color you use. They don't have any significance in the game. It's just different colors for aesthetic purposes. For food on cards, so some birds, for instance, will eat seeds when you activate them. So if I find that bird right here, when activated, gain 1 seed from the supply and catch it on the card. So for instance, if this bird was in the forest, because it has to go there, and there was 3 seeds on there, this bird would get 3 points for those seeds. Some birds are predators, where if you eat certain birds of 75 centimeters or less, so for instance, if this bird was flipped up, it's 23 centimeters, this is a predator, this hawk would eat that bird and it would slide underneath. This bird would also be in the forest here. And so at the end of the game, as you see here, tucked cards are worth points. And so you add them all up, and whoever has the most points will win. So let me go over the anatomy of a card real quick before I go over how you set up the game. Because you see right here, there are a ton of birds, which gives you a lot of variety, and they tend to live all in North America. So anatomy of a card here is that this bird can be placed in the forest habitat, and you'll see here's the forest row, the grassland row, and the wetland row. So you could have up to 5 birds in each of these rows. This bird is worth 3 points at the end of the game. And so you'll see, for instance, that some birds are worth a lot of points, like this wild turkey is worth 8. Birds also have different kinds of nests, and they also tell you how many eggs they can have in a nest. So when you look in the rules here, you see there's an appendix. Appendix will help you with bird powers, which I'll mention in a moment on the card what those are. Will help you with bonus cards, and it has also an end of round goals description, which again I'll explain in a moment, and it gives a short little quick reference guide here on the inside page. But if you want to look at what the different type of nests are, because the different type of nests that you have will correspond to different victory points. So you look on page 8 of the current rulebook, there's a platform nest made out of sticks, a bowl type nest, a cavity, a ground where they lay eggs on the ground, and then a star, which can be used to represent any one of these as a wild kind of nest. So this turkey can lay 8 eggs in this nest, and this hawk can have 2. This wild turkey does not have any special abilities, but the hawk does, and I'll explain when you activate these. Well, when it's brown, that means when you activate an ability in a particular row, I would have to activate an ability here. When I move the activation cube, I'll get to use the hawk's powers if I want. Now it's important to remember any of the powers that you see on the birds you don't have to use, even when you lay them down. So you'll see here, for instance, here is a bird with a power once between turns. So this is not one where you put down an activation cube and then you move it across through your birds to activate them. This is one you got to remember. Once between turns, when another player's, the skull means predator, successfully gains 1 food from the bird feeder. So you gain 1 food from the bird feeder if a predator is successful in between rounds. So that's what the pink are. The pink represents in between rounds. The brown is when you take when you activate a row and that bird is on that row, you get to activate it. And then there's birds where it has a one-time use. If I can find the bird, I thought I had it out right here. If you want, you can draw 2. Let's see, is that gold cards? I'm trying to see. It's hard with the light here. Yes, you could draw 2 bird cards when you put this bird in its habitat. That's a one-time use thing. So if I put this bird in this habitat, I'll get to draw 2 bird cards from either the top of the deck or the ones that would be face up here in a moment. So the only other thing to keep in mind for a bird card is, again, its size. This gives some scientific text here as to where it lives. Up here it tells you what areas a bird can occupy. So this is a wetland because it's a duck. And then this one can occupy any of the 3 habitats. And then you'll see here what the cost is to place a bird. You need certain foods. So if you look here, we have fish, invertebrates, fruit, seeds, and rodents. So this particular bird, in order to place the bird in any one of these habitats, I would need a fish and any other kind of resource I want. This bird would cost an invertebrate, a seed, and a fish to place. And it can only go in the wetlands. All right, so let's take a look at setup now. First off, you want to decide which side of the goal board you want to play. So this side is more, they say to play with this because it's more fair. Every time you complete a particular goal, which would be here on chips, you get 1 point each. Whereas this one, it jumps from 0, 0, 1, and 4. So if you get up to 5, basically you're able to complete, if you get first place in that most. So I need some context here. If you get the most eggs in a platform, you'll get 4 points. If you're second place, you get 1 point. If you're third or fourth, you get nothing. So that's why they recommend you play with this, because it's not so punishing, so to speak. You're going to get points even if you get just one of the goals. So what you do is you take there is more than 4 chips here, and you just put them down randomly. And so here's what I laid down here. We got the most birds in the forest, the most eggs in the grassland, birds with bowls that have eggs, and the most total birds. So one thing to remember when you're going for these goals, you'll have 1 per round. Even if I have, well, you can't get more than 5 in the forest, but let's say here I have 7 birds at the end of the game. At most points I can get is 5. So it's important for the players to know what goals you're going for each round, because it's going to determine what birds you want to acquire and what birds that you put into your habitat, and if you need to lay eggs and so forth. So if you want to ever look up what the different goal chips represent, that's where you have this appendix page, the second page, that gives you information on how to read those. So the other chips that I didn't use are just put off to the side. So the next thing is that each player is going to get 5 birds. And what I have here is a sample setup for 2 players. And I would draw them out of the piles there. So here I go. So Julie would get her 5 cards here, and she'd start looking at them. I'd get my 5 cards and start looking at them, keeping in mind those goals each round. We also start out with 1 of each food type. No eggs yet, because you got to first place a bird before you can lay eggs, and that's an action you can take. So here's Julie's. Now each player is going to get 2 goal cards, end of the game goal cards, not end of the round goal cards. And each player is going to keep 1 of these. So I'm going to look at these 2, and Julie's going to look at these 2. Now, why do you want to consider all these things at once? Because I'm going to have to decide which of these birds I want to keep. For every bird I keep, I have to give up at least 1 food, and I get to decide which foods I want to keep. So I know now that for the first round, I want to have birds in the forest. So what birds do I have here that I could place in the forest? This one, and this one. I'm probably not going to go with these 2 unless it has some activation power I really want to have for the whole game. But just for the sake of time here, I'm only going to consider these 3. And this one doesn't cost any food to place. This costs either an invertebrate or a seed. So I at least need to keep that. This one costs a rodent and 2 random, or not random, but 2 whatever I want. So because I'm keeping 3 birds, I'm going to keep a rodent for sure. I'm sorry, I'm keeping 3 birds. I'm keeping a seed and a rodent, and the rest of these will be put back into the supply because I have to have at least 1 food for every bird I'm keeping. But before I do that, I may change my mind. I haven't even looked at these goal cards yet. It says here, birds that have at least 1 egg laid on them. I need 7 to 8 birds to get 3 victory points. If I have 9 or more birds with 1 egg, I'll get 6 victory points. So that's a pretty good one for just in general, because I want eggs anyways at the end of the game for victory points. Birds that eat fish. All right, so this one requires some effort here to look at their activation abilities. All right, I do have here a white-faced ibis, and when activated, roll a dice, not in the bird feeder. I'll go over that in a minute. And any fish that are rolled, I'll gain 1 fish and catch it on the card. So if I had these 2 not in the bird feeder and I rolled it, I didn't roll fish, but if I did, it's on one side here, I would get 1 fish. So do I want this though? Because I need 2 to 3 birds that have that eat fish. I don't think I'm going to get that many birds with that ability. So I'm not going to keep this goal. I'm going to keep the one that's easier to do. I know I need 7 to 8 birds to do it, but I know I'm going to get that many birds in the game, and it'll be, at least I can get 3 victory points, whereas this one, I need less birds, but well, I get birds that need fish, that eat fish. So I just put this back underneath the deck, or some people like to do this for discard, so you don't have to worry about drawing again. It's unlikely you're going to go through the whole end of the game goal cards, but there are some birds that give you the ability to draw more goal cards. So, reviewing with what I'm starting out with here, I'm going to keep these 3 birds. I'm going to get rid of these 2 birds. To pay for each one of those birds, I have to get rid of 1 food each, which is what I do. And these go into the discard pile. Now, it's important to keep in mind later on, I want to get, again, eggs in the grassland, so I need birds that can go in the grassland, and I need birds that lay nests with bulls, and I just need a bunch of birds at the end. So right now, none of my birds, I could put this one in the grassland, so that will help for the second round goals. None of my birds have the bull type of nest, so I'm going to have to acquire some of those birds for round 3. So that's part of this game, is having an idea of what you're planning for with the round goals, because you play 4 rounds, you get a different goal each round, and knowing what you're, now this is secret, you keep this hidden from the other players, knowing what you're going for by the end of the game, and like I mentioned before, you might even get additional ones. So you got to kind of have an idea of an overall strategy for the game. So I put my food off to the side. These would be upside down normally, off in my hand. Other players don't get to know what birds you have, and then of course they don't get to know your end of the game goal card. This is the first player marker. I'll go first. I have 8 action cubes. And Julie, I'm just going to pick random things here. She needs birds with nests on the ground. She's going to do that one. Which means that can count as a wild for that. So she's going to keep these. And she can get this one into the forest. This is a good one because it's worth 8 victory points. So right here, she's keeping birds that are worth, if she gets all these in place, 17 victory points. So she needs fish, wild, seeds, and fruit. So she at least wants to try to get this one out. So she's going to keep the seed and the fruit, and she needs to get rid of 3 foods, 1 for each one of these birds. And she's going to keep this one. Now the other one she could have went with, birds worth less than 4 points. Well, she has birds that are worth a lot of points. I mean, she could have did this, 2, 1, and 3, but she'd rather go for birds worth a lot of points. So that's what she's going to keep. She gets rid of 3 food because she kept 3 birds. So I don't know what goal Julie's going for, nor would I know what birds she has kept. So now we are ready to start the game. Oh, one more thing. We need to start up with 3 birds that can be acquired as the game plays on. And players will inspect these and decide, like for instance, this bird here can be placed in the forest, in the wetlands. Okay, all 3 of these are birds with bowls, types of nests. And remember I mentioned I want to get some birds with bowls for the 3rd round goal. So I might be wanting to acquire these birds during this first round. Keep in mind you can have as many birds as you want. There's no hand limit. You can have even as much food as you want. There's no limit to that as well. What was the other thing? All right, so I need to explain the actions you can take during your turn. So we've set it up. We got our birds. We paid for those birds with the food that we started out with. We kept one of our goals, and we started out with our cards in the middle here. I'll roll these dice again just to show you from the back. You know, it's a cool bird feeder. So we know what food's available. Here's the general supply of food and the eggs. So each player will start out with 8 action cubes. The interesting thing is, every round you'll use one of those action cubes to keep track of the goals that you've completed for that round. So that means the second round you're only going to have 7 action cubes. The third round, 6 action cubes, and by the end of that round you're only going to have 5. So let me demonstrate here, because that might not have been clear. So let's say I did get 2 birds in the forest. I'd mark that there for 2 points. If I did on the second round, got a bunch of eggs in the grassland, I got 4 of that. So you see how now I have less cubes now for the third round. I only have 6. For this round, I didn't get many birds with bowls. Let's say I only got 1. And so now, the last round, I only have 5 actions to play with. So that's kind of important to know that you have 8, 7, 6, and 5. That really, you're only going to have 27 actions basically in the whole game, unless you have a bird that gives you additional actions. And there are some of those in the deck. All right, so let's go over how your habitat board works, because I'm going to go first. And when I go first, I'm going to take one of my action cubes. You're either going to, since I don't have any birds yet, I'm going to have to place my actions either in this row and column. So I could play a bird here. I can get food here. Lay 2 eggs here, but that's a waste of time because I don't have any birds to put the eggs on. I can get another bird here. As you start placing birds, let's say I did have a situation like this. That's the second round. I managed to get out 3 birds in the first round, which is highly unlikely because I need a lot of food. But it might be possible because that one doesn't need food. So now when I take the action, I look to the right or the leftmost space. So now I'm going to activate this row. I'm going to take 2 food, and then after I take 2 food from the bird feeder, which I'll explain in a minute, I will move the action cube across and decide, do I want to activate this bird's brown power? Then this is an in-between turn for this predator, so I don't worry about that one, and then I move it here. So as you place more birds to the right, let's say this bird was also here, I can get 2 food from the bird feeder on 2 different dice, and then give up if I had another bird in my hand, give up any bird I want and then get a 3rd food. Here I get 3 food, and if I manage to get 5 birds in this row, I can get 3 food and give up a bird card to get a 4th food. So the more birds that you have in a row, the more beneficial that power is. So this one right here is a gained food from the bird feeder row. If I were in this row and I wanted to lay eggs, I lay it to the leftmost empty space to the right of the birds I have in this row. I only have 1, so I'll get 2 eggs, and it doesn't matter what color I take, and I get to decide which bird I want to put eggs on. Now, according to the victory conditions for the second round, I definitely want to have eggs on birds in the grassland. So I want to get my eggs on this bird first, because that would count as 2 victory points for the end of round goal. So I move it here, and then I activate this bird's power if I want, and then once I'm done doing that, I put it here to show that I'm done. If I notice I don't have any birds here, so I could do this action though. I could still draw a bird card. So I would draw one of these face-up cards or take a random card from these piles. So that's how you use your habitat board. The more birds you have on a row, the more beneficial the powers are, either the gain a food action, the lay eggs action, or the draw birds cards action. The other one I didn't point out though is that if I do want to get another bird in the forest here, notice I have to be above in that column. So I have to pay the bird cost. Say I didn't have this bird here. I still have to pay the cost of 1 rodent and 2 food of any type, and 1 egg. So the problem is I don't have any eggs yet, so I can't place a bird in this. But I could instead go here where it doesn't cost an egg, and since this bird can go in all 3 habitats, I could put it here. I still have to pay the food cost though, but I don't have to pay an egg cost. One important rule to remember here is that if you don't have the type of food that you need, you can use 2 of any type. So let's say I did have the rodent for that one and a random. Well, actually, this is not a good example here. Let's say that I didn't have seeds, or let's say I went here and I already had an egg on this guy. In order to place this one, I need an invertebrate or seed, but all I have is a rodent and a fruit. Okay, so I take the egg off because I'm adding another bird in this column and it costs an egg, and then I could use 2 food of any type. They could be the same food of any type or different food to get my invertebrate or my seed. So that's an important little rule there to remember. It gives you some flexibility in paying for your birds. So that's a habitat board. So for the first turn, each player is going to have 8 actions. And in those 8 actions, we're going to take turns either gaining food, laying eggs, or drawing more cards. Keeping in mind that when we take an action in a row where there's already a bird, we move the action cube across and decide if we want to activate that bird's brown power. So I'll model my actions, what I'm going to do, because Julie will be doing her actions after me. I'll take an action and then she'll take an action. But in this game, there's not much player interaction other than if I were to take a card from here, I don't get a new card yet. I finish my turn, and then Julie would have a new card to consider. So when you take a card, you don't replace it immediately on your own turn, but it would be replaced on the next player's turn. So other than the pink cards where there's in-between actions, Remember I showed you the vulture here? For this demonstration, it really won't matter what Julie does, other than maybe me keeping track of what she's going for if I'm falling behind in points. So if she places those birds worth a lot of points, I might be thinking, wow, I'm falling behind. So I may be paying attention to that. So for this sample here, I'm not going to show you what Julie's doing. I'm just going to do my turn one after another. All right, so here we go. I have my 8 action cubes. I have this food. And so what I could possibly do here is I could put the mountain chickadee in, which I will because I want to be able to use its powers when I take food later on. So I'm going to put my action cube here. It doesn't cost an egg because there's nobody in this column yet. The mountain chickadee has to cost an invertebrate or a seed. I do have a seed. So I play that. And now the bird is in play. Notice I can't use its actions yet. I would have to take a food action on my next turn or later to get that activation. So that's what I'm going to do. So Julie goes, and now it's my turn again. So I have 7 actions left. I'm going, because I don't have enough food, well, I could play this black vulture right now. In fact, that's what I will do. No, I don't have eggs yet. So I'm going to, because if I take an egg action, I'm going to get 2 eggs. Oh, that's okay. I'm going to take an egg action right now. So I'm going to do this. I put it here. There's no birds here. So I take the leftmost column. I put it there. Now I take 2 eggs. And I have a bird here that can take up to 3 eggs. Again, it doesn't matter what color I use. So that's the end of that action. Julie goes. Now it's my turn again. Now I'm going to play this black vulture, which does not cost any points to do so. I'm sorry, it doesn't cost any food to do so. So right here, I put it in this column because I already have a bird in this column for the forest habitat. So I put the cube there. It doesn't cost any food to place the vulture. However, I do have to give up an egg. So I give up an egg on my mountain chickadee. So now I have 2 birds in my forest. So I'm doing good for that end of round goal. Remember, in the round goal for this particular game is I need as many birds as I can in the forest. As it says right here, birds in the forest. And right now I have 2, so that's 2 victory points. So my turn comes again. So I need food. So I'm going to take this action. I will get 2 food on the dice here. So I'm just going to put this in camera here, make it really nice and close. I could take any 2 of these dice. I need to get rodents. I already have a rodent in my personal supply. And I can get 2 of any kind that I want because it's wild. So I'm going to take now this is where I could paying attention to what kind of birds Julie has and take food that she would want more than me. Since this is wild, I can do that. Maybe she has a bird in play that needs fish. So I'm going to take the fish just so that I can slow her down a little bit. So I exchange that out. And then I'm going to take a fruit. Now the advantage of doing this, so to speak, now in a way this helps Julie. Because on her turn, or if I take food again next turn, when you have dice with the same face, you can decide to re-roll them before taking food. So it could even be a situation where I do this action again, and I take the fruit. On my next turn, I do it again. And then now there's 2 dice with the same face. Before I take my second food, I can re-roll these dice, which I will do. And then maybe I got something I wanted. So even when there's 1 die left, you don't have to take that food. You could re-roll that. Actually, I messed up there. When you re-roll the dice that are the same side, you re-roll all the dice, including the ones that are outside there. So I messed up on that. I re-roll them all. So now I have access to all these choices. So to make sure I didn't confuse anybody there, when dice all have the same side, if it could be 1 die, it could be 2 dice, 3 dice, you pick up those dice and the dice that have been already used on previous turns, and you roll all 5 dice. All right, so I got my food. I don't remember what it was in there. Doesn't matter though. for this demonstration. So now I move my action cube over. Well, this is once between turns. I'm not going to be able to use this guy because during this round, because Julie doesn't have any predators. I go here. Now I decide, do I want to use this bird's brown power? It says here, when activated, gain 1 seed from the supply and cash it on this card. Yes, I definitely want to do that because every food at the end of the game is worth 1 victory point. So I definitely do that, and I move it right here. So notice I took the 2 food action, and I moved my action cube to every bird to check to see if I wanted to do the action or not. So that was the end of my 4th turn. Julie goes. Now I'm going to do my 5th turn. So I want to get another bird into the forest. So this bird, I do have enough food here. I have my rodent, my fruit, and a fish because I can use any type I want. So I put my action cube here. I do have an egg, so I take the egg off. I put the bird here, discard the food, and now I have 3 birds in the forest, which is great because that'd be worth 3 victory points. I do not move it to each bird because this is play a bird. This is not, there's no birds in this row here. It's just playing a bird. So I've used 5 of my actions now. Now, you'll see I'm out of bird cards. So I could lay eggs to try, but I know now that if I can get another bird in the forest, that'd be great. Based on the goal, I want to get as many birds in the forest for this round. Or I could try to get a bird into the grassland because on the second round, I'm going to get as many eggs into the grassland. And right now, I don't have any birds in the grassland. So knowing that, I'm going to get a new card. So I'm going to look at what's available here, or I could take a blind, but because I know that on the 3rd round I need birds with bowls, I'm going to take one of these. Unfortunately, though, there's no birds in the grassland, so I may be missing out. I could do a random draw or take one of these for the 3rd round. I'm going to take this one for the 3rd round. I add it to my hand because I can only take 1 card. Now, if I did have a bird here, I could take 2 cards if I got rid of an egg on a bird. Or in this one here, I can get it if I had a bird here, even though it's not in the right area. I get 2 eggs plus an additional egg if I get rid of a food. And again, I know this is not in the right area here either. I just wanted to point out how you use these additional spaces. So all I did is got 1 card, and I got a card that I want to get ready to use for the 3rd round of scoring. So I go here. And I'm done. Julie goes. She also bought a bird, let's say, and I now have these birds available, and oh good, I needed birds that can be placed in the grassland. So now I'm going to take this action again. I'm going to look at the birds that are available in the grassland, and I might be, okay, this is 6 victory points. I'm going to go for that one. This might have a better power, but I don't care. I want victory points, so I'm going to go for this one. So I add it to my hand. So now I have 2 birds in my hand and 1 action left for this round. Julie goes. I replace the card for her. Then it's my turn. So I have no food to place these birds. I have no eggs on my cards, so I'm basically going to be planning ahead for the following round here. This bird needs a fish and a random, so I'm going to get a fish. I'm going to take a food action. I could discard one of these birds in my hand because I'd be holding, I'd have it like this. It wouldn't be on my board. I could get rid of this card here to get a 3rd food, but instead I was going to take 2. So I need a fish. So I look in the bird feeder here. I get a fish, and then I need to get a random. So it doesn't matter what I take. So I'm going to take this seed. I move across. I have this new bird here. Let me show you on camera. When activated, discard 1 egg from any of your other birds to gain 2 food from the supply. Bummer. I don't have any eggs, so I can't use it. Julie still doesn't have any predators, and anyways, that's only in between. I do get to do this bird and get a seed. So that is the end of the first round for me. Julie, because I went first, Julie would use her last activation. I have these 2 birds in my hand for later. Now we compare the goals for this round. Okay, so we look at how many birds are in the forest. I had 3. Well, first off, you take off all your activation cubes. Put them off to the side. I have 3 birds in the forest. And so I mark a 3. Let's say Julie was able to get 2. And now we're down to 7 action cubes for the next round. And I'm ahead by 1 point. If we were to compare what our total points is, I would look at what birds Julie has in play and if she has any seeds or any cards tucked underneath. That'd be if she had a predator, but she doesn't have any predators. So if we really want to know how I'm doing this so far with the first round, I take a look. This bird is worth 2, 2, and 5, so I have 9 points, plus 2 food cached on it, so that's plus 2 more, it's 11, plus what I have for the end of the round goal. I have so far 14 points for the first round. That's pretty good so far. But am I going to get as many victory points? Can I get eggs in the grassland, and then eggs on birds with bowls, and then my total birds at the end? So what happens at the end of the round? Julie now will become the start player. We marked our goals. Now, something to remember here, we remove all birds that are still face up and replace them with 3 new birds. Then we keep on playing until the 4th round, and then like I showed you on the scorecard here, we count up our points, and you'll see how this went in the playthrough if you're watching, if you decide to watch that. So that's Wingspan. The most important part is to understand how you use your activation cube in those rows and the columns, and to understand the strategy of how to get points with your birds, with your food and your eggs, and if you tuck any cards underneath as a predator. So the appendix will go over any special powers. If you draw a bird and you're not too sure what it does, you look it up. So let me show you real quick here. For instance, flocking powers. It will show you here, you find the name of the bird and you look to the right with those birds with that power. And this page, for instance, has hunting and fishing powers. The game also includes rules for solo play with some additional cards to help you play solo. So what I demonstrated here was basically a 2-player version, but I didn't have to show Julie's actions because the most interaction that really happens is, can I deny Julie any food? Or I have to pay attention if she's doing, if there's any between actions with predators, and if I take any cards from her that she might be going for based on the end of the round goals. So I hope you enjoyed that how to play of Wingspan. Please check out the review video and the playthrough. And if we get 100 likes, I know they're working on a expansion. By the time we get 100 likes, I'm sure it will be in print, and be happy to show you that on camera as well. So thank you for watching. I'm David.